The story begins in a packed federal courtroom, where the quiet hum of whispered speculation cuts through the stale air as everyone waits for the judge to read from a stack of documents that will lay bare the financial collapse of one of America's most controversial former power figures. Rudy Giuliani was hailed as America's mayor after 9/11, and later known as former President Donald Trump's personal attorney. Right now, he sits stiffly at the defense table, eyes fixed forward and hands clasped tightly. It is November 2025, and the room is waiting for the next chapter in his bankruptcy case. But today is different. Today, the court is revealing financial details long shielded from public scrutiny, numbers and transactions that paint a deeper portrait of how a man who once wielded enormous political influence now stands at the mercy of creditors, judges, and a paper trail he cannot outrun. The judge begins reading. Giuliani's total outstanding debt, already widely known to be above $150 million, has ballooned with new penalties, interest calculations, unpaid legal fees, and what the filings describe as materially incomplete disclosures. In 2023, the civil court found Giuliani liable for defamation after he repeatedly pushed false claims that Freeman and Moss helped orchestrate election fraud in Georgia. A jury later ordered him to pay $148 million, a number that instantly triggered experts to predict that bankruptcy was inevitable, and they were right. Giuliani filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on December 21, 2023, claiming less than $10 million in assets and more than $150 million in liabilities. But the court filings unsealed today go deeper than those early estimates ever did. The room shifts as the judge reads from the latest financial report, revealing transactions that creditors argue were suspiciously timed, including withdrawals and transfers made in the months just before the bankruptcy filing. Among them, payments to personal friends listed as consultants, reimbursements to travel companions that could not be fully verified, credit card charges related to private clubs, and sizable legal retainers paid to multiple attorneys handling various federal and state investigations, some linked to 2020 election efforts, and others tied to unrelated misconduct allegations. Giuliani's team has repeatedly insisted that every expense had a legitimate purpose. But the examiner's report concludes that Giuliani failed to maintain consistent financial records, overspent on personal expenses even after claiming insolvency, and provided incomplete responses during asset verification. As the judge reads further, the courtroom reacts to a line confirming that Giuliani had less than $60,000 in liquid cash at the time of the first quarter 2025 review, down from the already strikingly low amount listed in early 2024. The filings also detail unpaid invoices from at least 5 different law firms, with some attorneys formally withdrawing, and others stating they were still owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Creditors have accused Giuliani of attempting to prolong the bankruptcy proceedings, pointing to repeated delays, incomplete submissions, and missed deadlines. At one point, the judge even issued a warning that the case could be converted from a Chapter 11 reorganization to a Chapter 7 liquidation if Giuliani did not comply. But what truly shakes the courtroom today is the disclosure that several income streams were far smaller than Giuliani had previously suggested. His podcast and media appearances generated significantly less than public estimates, earning tens of thousands, not millions. Donations funneled through third-party organizations slowed dramatically after 2021, with the filings suggesting that many donors believed contributions were going directly to legal defense funds rather than personal expenses. The court documents also reveal that Giuliani's New York apartment, once symbolizing his prestige, was sold under distressed circumstances for far less than its estimated value, with most proceeds immediately absorbed by legal debts. There are also references to outstanding tax obligations, though the exact amounts remain partially redacted. For a man who once demanded fiscal discipline as mayor, the irony doesn't go unnoticed. Journalists in the back row type furiously, while legal analysts quietly whisper predictions about whether Giuliani will lose control of the bankruptcy entirely. The judge then turns to an argument raised by the plaintiffs in the defamation case, that Giuliani has not acted in good faith during the bankruptcy. Freeman and Moss's attorneys insist that Giuliani has continued to insinuate wrongdoing by them, despite the earlier court rulings declaring his claims false and defamatory. They are pushing for the court to recognize their judgment as a debt that cannot be discharged, meaning Giuliani would owe the full amount no matter what happens. The courtroom falls silent. The bankruptcy would not save him from the $148 million judgment, even if he eventually manages to reorganize or pay creditors pennies on the dollar. Experts watching from the press benches know this could define the rest of Giuliani's life. If the debt remains, the financial pressure never ends. If it is discharged, Freeman and Moss could be left fighting an empty shell with few assets to collect. As more documents are read, one surprising detail sparks a ripple. Giuliani's monthly expenses, listed at an amount far higher than expected, even after adjusting for multiple cost-cutting measures in early 2024. These include medical expenses, security costs, and travel for legal proceedings, but also surprisingly high restaurant charges, chauffeured transportation, and memberships. His attorneys argue that some expenses are unavoidable due to Giuliani's public exposure and ongoing threats received since the 2020 election. The judge proceeds to read the last section of the report, summarizing the overall financial condition. Giuliani's assets, income, and obligations are so severely imbalanced that even in the best circumstances, maximized income, minimized spending, and strict compliance, he would likely never be able to satisfy even a fraction of the total debt. The room absorbs the gravity of that statement. A former U.S. presidential candidate, former federal prosecutor, and former mayor of the nation's largest city, now facing the possibility of permanent financial ruin. Giuliani sits motionless, staring ahead as the judge orders him to produce a new, detailed financial disclosure by early December 2025. As the hearing ends and Giuliani rises to leave, cameras flash through the glass panels in the hallway. Reporters shout questions, asking whether he can recover from this, whether he believes the court is being fair, and whether he can pay the judgment. Giuliani says nothing. His attorneys simply guide him through the exit as chatter erupts about what today's revelations mean not just for him, but for the broader political and legal landscape. This case, once viewed as a straightforward bankruptcy triggered by a massive lawsuit, has transformed into a high-stakes legal saga involving allegations of misconduct, incomplete disclosures, and a level of financial instability that few anticipated. And with new filings expected in December, the story is far from over. What began as a financial reorganization has now become a national courtroom spectacle, one that raises questions about accountability, power, and what happens when the legal consequences of public rhetoric finally collide with reality. For the first time, the public has seen the full scope of Giuliani's financial downfall. Whether the debt survives bankruptcy, whether he can keep any of his remaining assets, whether the case escalates into allegations of fraud, all of that will unfold in the next chapter. But today, the shock lies in the scale of the collapse, the magnitude of the obligations, and the unmistakable message the court has sent. The era of ambiguity is over, and every dollar will now be accounted for under judicial oversight.